Okay, croeso, welcome everybody. We're just letting some people into the room and we'll be starting shortly. Okay, great. Prynhawn da, croeso, Mike Dwi. Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Mike, and welcome to the Centre for Digital Public Services Lunch and Learn session, Making Things Work Together. This is the 5th in a 6-part series on user-centered design. So just to let you know, we will be recording today's session and sharing this on our YouTube channel. So please turn your camera off if you don't want to be seen. Now, today's session will be delivered by our new service designer at the CDPS, Vic Smith. So I will only have half an hour for this session, so I will pass you swiftly over to Vic. Go, Vic.
Hello, diolch Mike. Hello, croeso. Vic Adwi. Hi, I'm Vic Smith. I'm a service designer here at the Centre for Digital Public Services. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thought I'd start off by introducing myself a little bit and giving you a little bit of my background. So I've always worked in public services right from the beginning of my career. And I've always kind of been a designer, but for a long time, I didn't really know that that's what I was doing. So Liam talked to you last week about design being a way of thinking and being creative in the way that you solve problems. And I do recommend you go back and have a look at that video if you didn't join us last week. So I've always been creative and innovative in the way that I look at solving problems in the services that I've worked in, and always had this sort of overriding ambition. I wanted to make the lives of those using the services that I've worked in, and I've worked in local government, in education, in the civil service, and always sort of looking with that ambition to improve the lives of those people. But as I say, for a long time, didn't realise that what I was doing was actually designing services. So if I've just mentioned some things that you think you're doing at the minute in the job roles you're doing, even if you're not called designer, it doesn't matter that your job title doesn't say that. That still means that service design is for you. So I'm just going to now share a little bit about what I'm going to talk about more specifically today. So I'm going to share with you the wonderful world of service design. When I found service design, it really changed how I approached that work that I was talking about before, about how I wanted to improve the lives of people through the public services that I was working with. Some of you might already have designers that work in your organisation. And Liam, again, he talked to you a little bit last week in his first sort of introduction to design lunch and learn about how it's really important that you can get designers working on your projects really early on in them. So if you have some designers working in your service, today, hopefully I can share some of the ways that you might be able to get them to help you with the problems that you're working on solving. Or if, like me, you don't have designers working in your teams and you're working in teams with people with lots of different job titles, but this sounds like something that you are interested in, I'm going to share with you today some of the ways that you yourself can get started with service design. So if you like, today's your official invite, not that you needed one, to start thinking of yourself as a designer of the services that you are working in and start developing some of those skills that will help you to improve the services that you are working on so for the users of your service. So I'm going to start off then with what is service design. Well, as I talked about, service designers are really looking at working in innovative and creative ways. So it's quite unsurprising that there are lots and lots of different ways of looking at what service design is and lots of different definitions. But I'm going to start today with this nice simple one because I think it's a really good place to start. So service design is just this idea of designing the service and designing it with mindfully and really thinking about how the different parts of the service work together. And ultimately, we're doing that to help someone do something that they need to do and help them to do it better. In public services, we're working to deliver government policy that helps citizens do a variety of things, helping them to be healthier, happier, more informed, to upskill them, help them to be safe, help them to be valued equally, helping them to look after the planet. And there's loads more examples. But sometimes between that policy intent that the government laid down and the delivery of the service, we can lose that a little bit. Something else that can get a little bit lost when we're looking at our services is that perspective of our user as well. So what we do as service designers is trying to bring some of those different perspectives together and ensure that the service is both delivering on that government intention, but also making sure that whatever the problem is that the service user is trying to solve, we're making sure that they're able to do that in the simplest way possible. So I'm going to start off today by considering a little bit what a bad service might look like. So have a think about some of the services that you have used before, and how they can be sometimes frustrating, slow, confusing. Please feel free in the chat to share some of your examples if you'd like to. And I want to point out here that there's no such thing as a perfect service. We are all working in public services, doing our very best with the knowledge, time and resources we have in that moment. But day-to-day pressures can mean we can lose sight of what our service user really needs. I'm guessing if you are like me working in public services, that you are driven by that desire to want to help other people and to want to deliver those better services. And also thinking about the people who are also using our service, the other people who are using our services are the people who work within them, and also working within a badly designed service is also a very frustrating place to be. The title of today's talk is about making services work together. And in recent years, we have worked to move lots of our public services from offline services, face-to-face, into online services. When we've done that, we haven't always put at the centre of that considering how that service is experienced by our users. And as service designers, we want to make sure that we are designing our services in a way that make it easy for our service users to solve their problems. We don't want to make that difficult for them. So on the flip side, we're going to consider some of the good elements of a service. So good services really do focus on solving that whole problem for the user, and that's going to be a theme that I'll return to a few times today. Because really when we're designing our public services, that is what it's about. It's about making sure that we are delivering that policy intent for government, but we're also making sure that our service user can solve the problem that they come to us with in the first place. And making sure we can do that in the most efficient and effective way, and make those transitions as much as possible really nice and smooth for them, so that the transitions between any online and offline parts of the service, any transitions that are happening where service users are moving through the service and they're moving from different teams within an organisation, or sometimes moving between different organisations, maybe from local to central government, that we're making sure that those transitions are smooth and we're not losing people along the way. I'm just going to share with you then a couple of examples of what that might look like in real life. So the first one I'm going to share with you is cost of living. So obviously this is a big problem at the moment, and certainly one that we want to help people to solve. So if you're a user who's trying to find services to help you with cost of living, you first of all really want to understand what you're entitled to, and also how to access that easily. The problem is that lots of these services are available, and the funds that people are entitled to sit across lots and lots of different teams within organisations, be that in local government or central government, and between those two organisations. So actually, as somebody trying to access those services, it can be really difficult to find the help that you are entitled to, and do that in an efficient and cost-effective way, cost and timely way. Equally, the second service that I wanted you to consider was if you wanted to build an extension for your house. As a service user, what you want to do is to make sure that you are that you are able to build your extension legally. So no one's going to come and make you take it down after you've built it. And obviously you want to make sure it's been built in a safe way. It's not going to fall down, and it's not going to be unsafe for anybody using that building. They're the problems that you have. But again, those services sit within different teams and different parts of different organisations. So different teams maybe within local government, but then some of the help and advice that you would need to be able to do that in the most effective way might sit within information on central government websites. So job as a service designer is to make sure that the user can solve those problems that we talked about at the beginning there. So we don't want a building that's going to fall down. We want to make sure that no one's going to make us take it down afterwards because it's not legal. We want to make sure that we can access that in the smooth way, and we're meeting those. So as designers, we want to make sure we're meeting those user needs. So why do we need service design to help us do this? Lots of what I've talked about there is common sense, and I'm sure many of you will agree with some of the things I said. So in this next section, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we specifically need service design to help us to do this. So first of all, I'm going to show you another quote, this time from Lou Down. So I just want you to think about that quote for a moment. And when we're designing services, sometimes we think about not changing our service and it's staying the same as being a bit of a neutral position. But actually, when we're designing a service, if we're making a decision to not change things within that service, then actually we're making a decision sometimes to continue to provide a service that can be quite frustrating to use. And actually, in some circumstances, depending on what the service is working on, actually can be quite harmful to the users of those service. So just want to consider for a minute the services that we work within and how we might have changed and how we might have approached changing those services in the past. Thanks, Elise. So I just want a little nod here to the superheroes that you all are. Anybody who's working in public services is working often in the shadows, in the background, really hard on services, and trying to, with that intention of wanting to improve the lives of the people that are working in that service. We're really privileged. It's a really privileged position that we work in. And that we have this power to change people's lives and have this impact daily on people's lives. When we've digitized services, though, sometimes we haven't really focused on the impact that online and offline service is having on our users and how that transition between the two. So, for example, we've made some services really difficult to find, as I talked about before, and we've also not really considered how our service users are moving within that service. So what service design does is it has a set of tools and ways of thinking that can encourage us to think about that whole service, not just the digital elements, from the perspective of the person who is using the service. So in this next section, that's what I'm going to share with you, is some of those ways of thinking and some of those tools that can help us to realign our services to ensure that we are meeting those needs. So one of the first things that we do as service designers is to help people to understand the service and to help them understand the problems within the service. So we work within the discipline of user-centered design. So our focus is often on that user perspective and making sure we're solving the problems of users when we're designing that service. But we are also working to balance those needs with the other people who are working within that service. So that might be the people working in the service. We also want to consider it from a whole organisational level. We want to consider any financial or technological constraints that are going to impact on the service delivery. And most importantly, we also want to be thinking about how that service impacts on society as a whole. So we want to be balancing those things. So one of the things we do as service designers is we zoom in and out of the service, looking at it from that big picture level of the service, ensuring that any solutions that we consider are taking that into consideration alongside those user needs. So understanding the problem. Another thing that we do is to explore problems. So we use different types of thinking at each stage of the design process to make sure we're exploring the problem from different perspectives, generating questions, possibilities and solutions before making choices. So we're using two types of thinking: divergent thinking, where we are creating choices and really thinking about all of the possibilities of how we can consider the service and come up with some solutions of how we can solve that. And then using convergent thinking to make choices. So Liam also shared an example of this type of thinking last week. As designers, we use workshops where we try and bring together all of the users and stakeholders to help them to inform us on how we design the service. It's an iterative process where we try and build in feedback loops. Gabby, Jana and Tom, in the first two sessions of this user-centered design series, talked to you about research and user testing. So I'll not go into much detail there, but please do go back and watch their videos if you'd like some help with that. And using that to continue to inform the improvements as part of the design process. So thinking about how we can feedback our insights from users to help us improve the service as we're building it. But then also, once the service has been launched and it's live and it's in place, using those feedback loops to keep coming back to the service. It's an iterative process. We want to make sure that we're continuing to focusing on the right problem. So in those early from lots of different perspectives to make sure that we've definitely established what the right problem is for the user. Sometimes it can be really easy when you've worked in a service to assume that there are parts of the service that that need to be improved, but actually we need to make sure that we have established what the right problem is. We don't want to keep fixing something that actually is part of the problem. We want to make sure that we've come up with the correct solution. So this thinking process can help us to establish that. And then the final thing that I wanted to share with you is how, as designers, we use visualization to help us to understand and make and test solutions for services. So we like maps in service design, so we use lots of different types of maps and diagrams to help us and other stakeholders to understand the service, not only in its current state, so we can establish maybe where some of the problems and the pain points in the service are, but also to help us to visualize what that service could look like in the future. When we're mapping services, so this is an example of a service blueprint, we're looking at mapping the service from start to finish. So from the moment when the user finds our service and helping them to find sometimes actually helping them to find the service in the first place, right to the very end when we've solved that whole problem from them. We're looking at it from the perspective of the service user in the first instance, but then we also want to be mapping in what the service looks like behind the scenes. So looking at it from the perspective of the different teams and the different people that work within that service, and considering also the transitions that happen between those teams, but also the transitions that happen between the online parts of the service and the parts of the service that work offline as well. And service blueprinting can help us with that. We're aiming to make that user's journey through that service as efficient and as effective as possible to help them solve their problem. After the lunch and learn today, you will get a link to a blog post as well, which will go into more details about how to map services. So it gives you some details on how to put together a service blueprint, but also some of the other mapping tools that we use in service design. Thank you so much for all of you for listening this far. We're moving into our final section now, where I'm going to give you some tips of how you can get started with service design. I can only assume that you're thinking that this all sounds amazing and that you'd like to get started within the services that you work within. So I'm going to share with you 3 tips. My first tip today then is to just start. Don't wait to be asked, don't wait to be given permission, don't wait for the invite, just get started. If you're working in public services and you're already thinking about solutions on how to improve those services, you are essentially already designing your services. So get started, but maybe start thinking around using some of the tools that I've shared with you and some of the frame ways of thinking that I've shared with you today. In particular, starting to move into that user perspective, so doing some user research, and I did mention the first 2 videos in this series will help you out with how to get started with user research as the beginning bit of that process of designing your service. The second tip then that I wanted to share with you today is around creating examples. So if you want to shift into this area of user-centered design and service design with an organisation that hasn't traditionally maybe used that as a tool set and a way of thinking, part of your work can be to try and make sure that other people in that service see what you're doing and how you're creating impact in that service and improving the service. So start by gathering examples, so any photos, screenshots, any data that you're gathering, anything that you can use to show the impact and the value of the work that you're doing is going to help you with the next tip that I'm going to move on to, tip 3, which is about working in the open. So sharing what you're doing with other people. As part of this, trying to seek out mentors who are already doing this work, who you can share your passion with and your enthusiasm about service design. Also trying to find some collaborators who are maybe working on a similar service, either inside your organisation or outside your organisation, and maybe looking for how you could help each other out with designing the services. Often if you're working on a service, there will be somebody else out there who has already worked on a service like that who will be able to give you some insights. And then finally, finding your champions at decision-making level who can make sure that the right people are seeing the value of your work so that you're getting that support within your organisation to move your service design work forward. And as I said, some of those examples and the data and the screenshots and then the impact that I talked about in tip 2 will really help you with selling why service design is important to the key stakeholders in your organisation. Which brings me on to thanking you for allowing me to talk to you today about why I think public services in Wales need service design, and why you can start designing services that you work on, even if you don't have service designer in your job title at the moment. Hopefully you are itching to find out more, so I thought I would just share with you a few ways that you can do that. First of all, if you think I can be of any help to you, please do get in touch. I would love to hear about the services you are working on, any questions that you have. So please do use that email address if you would like to. We also here at Centre for Digital Public Services have a community of practice, the Building Bilingual Services community of practice, and we're always looking for more people to join us there. So if you'd be interested in joining on us in that community of practice, where you can also perhaps find some of those collaborators and who you could, and mentors that you could work with on the services back in your own organisation. So that would be a lovely place to go and meet some other people working in this space in Wales already. And then the other thing I wanted to share with you today was some other resources that you could use to get started with service design. The first one, I shared that quote earlier from Lou Down is really a thought leader in this area. Good Services, her book, is a really good place to start to unpick and understand what service design can do for your organisation. So I really highly recommend that book. Also, when I was getting started, Service Design Show was something that really helped me. So that is a podcast where different service designers working across the public and private sector talk on the podcast about a particular area of service design each week. So there's some really good resources from if you go over to their YouTube channel. And then the service organisation, this is a really very new book actually that's only come out recently, which can be a really good one to read to help you, as particularly if you're working at sort of leadership level within services and looking at how you can bring service design and the principles of service design into your whole organisation. So I highly recommend those books, which I think just leaves me to say, thanks Elise, leave you with a final thought. So final thought there is from Lou Down in their book, Good Services. And the final thought from me is really, don't wait for permission. Go off and help your organisation to make the world a better place for everybody that accesses your service. Thank you so much for your time today. So if you do have any questions, I shared my email address before. I think we probably don't have a lot of time for questions today, but equally, if you'd like to post any questions in the chat channel, I'll go back and I'll make sure that I answer those after the session today. So that's all from me. Thank you so much for joining us today. Diolch yn fawr. And over to you, Mike.
Diolch yn fawr, Vic. That was great, and a really good introduction into service design and getting us thinking about where we can start. And I know with these lunch and learns, they're evolving here at the Centre for Digital Public Services, and we'll be doing, plan is hopefully from May, we'll have another series where we'll do some more deeper dives into these subject areas. And that brings me nicely in terms of just covering off the series. We've got one final session in this series next week, and that's going to be delivered by our head of user-centered design, Joe Goodwin. So if you haven't heard Joe speak before, get yourself along. This will be a great session looking about how we can ensure our service is inclusive and accessible. So I'll post a link into the chat shortly, and we'll also send that in a follow-up communications to get you signed up to that one. And if you want to catch up on any of these sessions that we've run so far, we have a playlist on YouTube. So again, I will post in the chat the link to the YouTube playlist, but you can catch up on all the lunch and learn sessions. We've had ones from user research to testing your service to content design. Great session here today, Vic, which will be made available soon, and obviously Joe's one next week on inclusivity and accessibility. So yeah, please keep following us. If you want to subscribe to the newsletter, come onto our website and you'll get all the notices on our events and our mailings. And we also tomorrow we have our ar-lein coffee. We run these every other Tuesday. Liam Collins, our interaction designer, delivered a session last week on design. He will be there tomorrow to answer any questions that you have maybe for Liam. He's also thinking of running a creative thinking practical exercise. So if you'd like to get your teeth stuck into a practical exercise with Liam, then get yourself along to that lean coffee. And I've got a lot of links to post to this chat, but I'll also send it in the follow-up communication with you tomorrow. So, but yeah, lean coffee with Liam tomorrow. And I think that wraps things up. Oh yeah, the final thing, this is it, there was one more thing, is we'd like to get your instant feedback just to see how you felt today's session was. We've got some some statements up on our Menti. If you haven't used Menti before, really simple to use. If you go onto menti.com and enter that code, just let us know if this session made sense to you, what learnings you are. If there's more stuff that you want to learn, we can gather that feedback and also start to design future sessions and training courses for you in mind. So there's a link into the chat there. I've got a link here to the Eventbrite session with Joe for next week, which has just gone into the chat while you're filling in that Menti, and also to our YouTube playlist. So I will leave those links with you and I will give a final sign off. So we'll see you very soon, and thank you for everyone here at the Centre for Digital Public Services. Have a good rest of the day.